All right, good morning, Pittsburgh Unified School District parents.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Oh, sorry.
Good morning, Pittsburgh Unified School District parents and families. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our presentation on recognizing anxiety and fears in teenagers. Before we get started throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please place your questions in the Q&A. We will not be using the raise hand feature during today's presentation. Again, please place your questions in the Q&A. And also, if you need Spanish translation, if you can please select the icon at the bottom of your screen that says interpretation. And we are recording this morning's session. Muy buenos días a todos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana para nuestra presentación en Reconociendo y Manejando la Ansiedad y Miedos en Adolescentes. Si usted desea la presentación en español, por favor, seleccione la imagen en la parte de abajo de su pantalla que dice interpretación. Se mira como un pequeño globo. Seleccione allí interpretación y luego seleccione el idioma de español. Si está entrando al taller por medio de su celular, puede ser que necesita seleccionar donde están los tres puntitos y dice more o más. Seleccione allí donde están los tres puntitos y luego allí puede seleccionar traducción y luego el idioma de español. All right, so thank you again for joining us this morning for our presentation on recognizing anxiety and fears in teenagers. Joining us this morning is our district nurse, Nurse Raquel Torres, and her team of nurse interns. And doing today's presentation will be Ezequiel Blanco, Tanya Molina, and Stephanie Romulo. And so thank you again for joining us and welcome Nurse Torres, Ezequiel, Tanya, and Stephanie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Ms. Leticia Prasado, for that intro. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today and sitting here with us so we can learn together about how to recognize anxiety and fears in teenagers. And again, I'm Stephanie, and then here we have Tanya and we have Ezequiel. All right, so I'd like to just give everyone a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing here during this presentation. So I'll move to this next slide, where which will outline what we're going to discuss. So basically, we're going to be going over in the first few slides the definitions of anxiety and fear, specifically in teens and the adolescent population. And again, we're going to go over the specific age groups that fall into that category. And then we're also going to discuss anxiety and fears specifically related to 4 topics, because anxiety and fear can be such a broad topic, especially in different age groups and different seasons in life. And so we're talking about anxiety and fears specifically to teens. And the 4 topics that we will be going over includes specifically the COVID-19 pandemic, how physical appearance can cause anxiety and fears in teens, academic success and or failure, and also relationships. And adding on to that, we'll also dive a bit deeper into what kind of signs and symptoms you would notice or observe when this occurs. And we also have provided statistics, the prevalence of this in this population and also within our community, and the common causes and triggers of anxiety and fears in the adolescent population. And we also have provided community and local resources in which you guys can reach out to in case you guys are experiencing or you have family members who are experiencing anxiety and fears. Okay, so now we're going to move on to defining anxiety and fear, and I'll pass it on to Tanya.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya Molina. And I will be talking a little bit about the definition of anxiety and fear in teens. Bear with me 1 minute. So anxiety can be very common in the preteen years, and it mostly has to do with changes that are happening within the teens, such as emotional, physical, and social change. These changes happen simultaneously as the brain changes. Teenagers are looking at new life experiences challenges, and venturing out for more independence. Therefore, it is only natural that teenagers feel this way. This can also be a similar feeling of stress. Keep in mind that even though anxiety may have a negative connotation, it may also indicate that the teen is aware of the situation they may be in, which makes them really think about it. The feeling of anxiety may also help with motivating the teen to do their best and to also prepare them for challenging situations. Fear is a response to a situation that is automatic, and it's a form of reaction to an emotion. When a teen has a feeling of fear, it has similar changes to the body that align with anxiety. The body's way in response to fear is to prepare the body to either fight or flight. All the physical changes that fear causes promote a rapid response to danger.
Thank you, Tanya. So what Tanya had briefly went over earlier was, again, the definitions of fear and anxiety. And she had explained what leads to it, what could be the causes of it. And we also provided here on this slide specific signs and symptoms, which could be physiological and also psychological. So some physical symptoms that you would see presenting in the individual, and also some mentally or emotionally. So I wanted to outline here and a few examples for this. Let me just move this slide down. So for example, in fear, you might see in an individual really fast heartbeat. They might be having difficulty breathing, which also would be known as shortness of breath. They may also be sweating, trembling, or they may feel nauseous, and that's related to fear. And then on the other hand, we have anxiety, which would include the psychological manifestations or signs and symptoms rather. Aside from including the symptoms of fear, it also has, in addition to that, having the sense of doom, feeling like it is hopelessness, their ears may be ringing, they might have trouble sleeping or concentrating in whatever aspect they're doing. They might not be able to concentrate very well if you're just talking to them or they're in class. They might also have some stomach problems that they might complain about, and some dizziness. So these are some symptoms that you might see that the individual is experiencing if they are going through fear and anxiety. And we're going to continue on discussing what are some other symptoms specifically related to the topics that we had mentioned earlier. So I'll hand it over again to Tanya.
So we wanted to emphasize how anxiety and fear affected teenagers during the pandemic, as it is prevalent. Many teenagers have found themselves anxious and worried about the pandemic and how it has affected their day-to-day life. They were also concerned on how much it has affected their loved ones, especially the elderly, and whom they have lost due to the pandemic. A lot of students were also turned to learning from home, which many have struggled with. Sports activities were canceled, and many were not able to follow up on their annual medical exams, which therefore set them back academically, delayed their healthcare needs, and isolated them from children and their physical activity. Teenagers were not understanding the idea of being confined to their homes, which in turn can cause irritation and arguments, as this is something that they are not used to. Many were also worried about how contracting the virus would affect them personally, which caused fear and panic. Others decided to drop out of school and help their families at home, as many of their parents and family members lost their jobs. This caused worrisome to those and not having enough food to eat, or the possibility of not having a roof over their head. Many also experienced firsthand racism, especially towards the Asian community. And because of this, some have refused to leave their homes, have isolated themselves, which have left them fearful, anxious, depressed, with a sense of distress and avoidance. Here are some signs and symptoms to keep in mind with your teenager. some feeling of hopelessness and or rage, frequent conflicts with family members and or friends, loss of interest in activities previously enjoyed, difficult time falling asleep or sleeping excessively, changes in appetite, weight loss or gain, less interest in schoolwork and drop in academic effort, increase in risky behavior such as drugs and alcohol, and thoughts of suicide. Another topic we wanted to discuss was how physical appearances can cause some anxiety and fear in teenagers. Puberty may begin as early as age 8 for girls and as early as 9 for boys. Many at this age become very self-conscious of their appearance. They also tend to become sensitive and worried about their body image and even compare themselves to others their same age. Both girls and boys may become anxious about not being ready to begin puberty and may even start to separate themselves from their family members and create their own identity. This can lead to conflict as parents may want to keep control. Body image dissatisfaction is also another common issue with teenagers. This is when adolescents have a negative perception of their physical appearance and the thought of or feelings resulting from these perceptions that they have created. This may play a role in the etiology of anxiety disorder symptoms in teenagers, influences from family, peers, and social media, etc., on what body ideal should be affect these teenagers because they internalize it as a personal standard to their self-worth and important to attain. This can lead to teenagers feeling poorly about their physical appearance and create a sense of low self-esteem. Here are some signs and symptoms to look out for when you think that your teenager has feelings of fear and anxiety when it pertains to their physical appearance. So feelings of sadness, insecurity, low self-esteem, loss of appetite, weight loss, that may lead to also eating disorders, anxiety, depressed, upset at the way they look, avoid to be seen by others, and an extreme focus on their physical appearance.
Thank you, Tanya. So like we went over the first two topics of how anxiety and fear is related to the adolescent population. So of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and how physical appearance can play a big part on causing, unfortunately, anxiety and fear in that population. Another one that could cause this would be related to academic failure and success. There may be often times where the students may be comparing themselves to peers. They might notice that some students in their class might be getting ahead, and while themselves are falling behind. They might not be achieving the same grades that they are as their other classmates are, or maybe they weren't able to reach that specific score that they were hoping for themselves. Of course, there's that fear of falling behind. And according to, I listed here one of our resources, the National Society of High School Scholars, they indicated that in related to fear of failing or success, there is that perspective out there that academic success leads to upward mobility. And some students may feel that if they don't do well in class, they might think that they're going to be failures for the rest of their lives, or if they're not doing very well, they're not going to be able to catch up to their peers and succeed in terms of maybe graduation, or maybe getting into a good college or good university that they're hoping for, or they might start to feel that because they aren't able to accomplish or reach these steps, they may not be able to succeed in life at the very end. And so they might start thinking about their future and start comparing themselves to their peers and start to feel those anxiety and fears related to that specifically. And some things that could actually contribute to this might also be lack of preparation for some of the students. They might have anxiety already thinking about how they could fail in their future, and they might start to kind of basically lack to prepare or fail to prepare rather for their studies or for whatever it is they are doing in their current season in life. They also might have lack of motivation, or might be, for lack of a better term, a bit lazy. They might not have that motivation to pursue academic success because they might feel as though studying is useless. They might see in their environment or some from their peers, they might be influenced by other people that may have told them that studying might not be useful considering the community they're living in. They might not see a lot of opportunities to succeed or to thrive in their lifestyle. So that could also contribute to their anxiety and fears, specifically for academic failure and success. Moving forward, these are a few signs and symptoms, not so much related to the physical manifestations or rather the physical signs and symptoms we had gone over earlier, but these are some things that you might notice in the student or the adolescent population. Because of their fear and anxiety related to those academic success, they might refuse to go or participate in school activities because they might again start to compare themselves to their peers and feel that if they're not succeeding on the same level as their peers, they would rather stay at home and avoid seeing or participating in school activities to refrain from feeling even worse or making their fear even bigger, I guess. And some students may even go to school late intentionally because again, it ties back to lack of motivation, or they feel like it's not very helpful or useful to go to school at the end. And so they may not go to school on time, and they might not be paying attention in class. They might not be putting too much effort into studying or preparing for an exam, or they just don't care at all if they're not doing well academically. So they're not putting in any effort into trying to raise their grades, or they don't mind if they failed an exam or didn't pass an assignment. So those are a few signs and symptoms you might notice. Moving forward to our fourth topic related to anxiety and fears for the adolescent population, it's fears and anxiety through friendships or relationships. This might actually be a result of what they have already experienced prior in their previous experiences. Like, for example, social rejection. They might not have been very welcomed in a friend circle or a social group, or within their family alone. They may not have felt that that love or that acceptance from family and friends. And so they start to fear that it's going to occur again. And so they might start to fear that they're going to get hurt again, or they might be betrayed at one point if they go forward with a friendship or a relationship. And they may also have that fear of abandonment. So they might feel that what they once experienced might happen all over again. And so that lingers within them. A few signs and symptoms related to this is the anxiety and depressive symptoms that we had mentioned earlier. They might feel the feeling of hopelessness, or like there's no use in establishing relationships with people because they're just going to get hurt, or those people can't be trusted, and they're just going to they're going to end up being betrayed at the end. And they also might isolate themselves. You might hear this individual say, "I'd rather be alone than be with a friend or be with other people because they're just going to hurt me at the end of all of it." So those are a few signs and symptoms you might see in these individuals. So when does fear and anxiety typically start? It varies depending on age group and the season of life, but typically, specifically referring to the adolescent population, it says that social anxiety disorders, which is a severe form of social anxiety that usually has two peak onsets. So usually occurs either in late childhood or mid-adolescence, depending on the individual's experience. And per this study, 9% of adolescents in the United States actually experience social anxiety in their lifetime. Sorry about that. We also wanted to include how often anxiety occurs within teens. And so we wanted to provide some numbers here for us to take a look at. So according to the CDC, the Centers of Disease Prevention, it says that about 7.1% of children, specifically ages 3 to 17 years old, if you were to put it in the population, approximately 4.4 million of the population is actually diagnosed with anxiety. And 3.2% of children ages 3 to 17 years old, again, approximately 1.9 million, have been diagnosed with depression. And if you take a look at the box on the right side, we see that unfortunately these numbers continue to go up. We haven't seen much of a decline over the years. So if we look here, we see that in 2003, the numbers were 5.4%, and then a few years later in 2007, it actually went up to 8%. So it appears then in 2011 that it continued to increase to 8.4%. So it's steadily increasing as opposed to decreasing in this population. And these statistics found in the box on the right, those are specifically for the ages 6 to 17 years old. So we see that it often occurs, unfortunately, in the teens, and not much has been put into, unfortunately, to decrease the amount of teens experiencing anxiety and fears. So it continues to grow over the years. And looking at how often anxiety occurs in diverse communities with multiple cultures, we wanted to specify the top three here that are affected. So according to this resource, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, back in 2019, they specifically listed that Black Americans, about 20% of the population is affected. Latinos and Asian Americans as well are also affected. And taking a closer look at what kind of conditions the Latinos are experiencing, they experience generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and also alcoholism. And in addition to that, Black Americans are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems than the general population. And Black youth who are exposed to violence are at a greater risk for PTSD, which is also post-traumatic stress disorder, by over 25%. And this could be an influence or a cause of their experiences or their communities or their lack of resources. And going back to our specific topics, I wanted to list these statistics for us because, of course, we all know how much the COVID-19 pandemic has affected each and every one of us individually. And so looking at it county-wise, we the Contra Costa County, which is the county we are in, it's actually the top 3 for the highest case counts for Bay Area for COVID-19 cases and deaths. And then, oh, I'm so sorry. And following that then would be San Francisco and San Mateo County. And you can see the significant difference in the cases and the amount of deaths for our county, considering or comparing it to the rest. And taking a closer look, this one actually lists here the COVID-19 cases specifically in this Pittsburgh Unified School District. So right now, or there were 53 active cases on site that were listed, and there could even be more because there's still some pending data. And then for the total student cases, I believe this is from the beginning of the pandemic, there were roughly 1,500. And then on top of that, the staff, there were roughly 200 cases listed. And the reason why I listed these numbers here for the COVID pandemic is because these are easily accessible. They are anyone can look it up on the websites, and some teens or adolescent populations who are curious will have access to these too. And this could contribute to their anxiety, looking at the numbers and how it's very large within their community. It could cause anxiety and fear in them because they might think, oh, they could easily contract this disease, or either one of their loved ones could be a victim of the COVID-19. And so this could cause them to think many things and many thoughts that could lead to their anxiety and fears. Moving forward with anxiety related specifically to physical appearance. I'm sorry if I didn't mention earlier, our top 2 topics that we wanted to focus on today was how anxiety and fear related to COVID-19 and also how physical appearance affects in the adolescent population. So moving now to physical appearance, I wanted to list again some statistics how often it occurs in the teens. And so we see here among girls who perceive themselves thin, there's more than half of them are quite content with their body and shape, but unfortunately about a quarter of them would like to be slimmer, and also a little over a quarter happy with their body shape. And that could lead to a negative body image, and that could lead to negative thoughts, and that could cause them to do certain actions such as eating disorders like Tanya had mentioned earlier, or it could cause them to withdraw from their adolescents who wanted to be slimmer in Turkey. I know this isn't within our community, but then it is prevalent all over. And so we see here it occurs more in girls. And so 43% of the girls have trouble with their physical appearance, and boys do actually also experience this struggle. It's about 18.3% of girls or boys rather, would much rather be slimmer or would like to change their body shape or size. So it is quite prevalent. It occurs often in the adolescent population. And continuing on to how often it occurs relating to the physical appearance in teens, like I mentioned earlier, they will have problems with negative body image, which puts them more at risk for depression and also eating disorders. And going in a bit deeper with eating disorders, we wanted to list what those would be. The most common eating disorders include anorexia nervosa or bulimia, which would be an explanation for another time, but just wanted to give you a brief overview of what eating disorders we were referring to earlier. And it could also lead to body dysmorphic disorders, which is also known as worrying about how your body looks and observing all the flaws. And so going back to how it ties to negative body image, if the teen or the adolescent is just uncomfortable or unhappy with how they look, it'll lead to negative images, and they will start to focus more so on their flaws and what they don't have and what they would rather have compared to their peers. And it could even eventually lead to social phobia, because they might feel like they're not good enough or they don't look as good as their peers. And so they would much rather stay away from activities or from crowds and from their classmates or friends, because they can't live up to that image that they were hoping for. So here we wanted to discuss some common causes and triggers that related to anxiety and fears. So it could be related to trauma or a past experience with COVID-19 related situations, or they have a personal or secondary experience with bullying. So for the trauma, it could be, like I mentioned earlier, a past experience of how they were treated with loved ones, or what, if it was not a firsthand experience, it may have been something they witnessed from someone within their family or someone close to them. Same thing with the COVID-19 related situations. They may have seen a loved one get sick. Unfortunately, they may have even witnessed the passing of someone, which could have left them very scarred or very worried about it happening again. And that those thoughts and those experiences can linger for a long period of time. And for the bullying, that could be related to actually both COVID-19 and physical appearance. They could be bullied because of how they look. They may look completely different from how their peers look, not only their shape and size, but it could also be skin-wise, or if it could be skin problems or anything like that, that could just put them, that changes their image compared to what others are used to seeing. And related to COVID-19, like what Tanya had mentioned earlier, there have been lots of populations that were affected because they may have been bullied for their culture or their race, or even just being infected alone. People could be bullied because they would not want to be near someone who has tested positive for COVID-19. So that could cause a lot of stress, fear, and anxiety within an individual. So moving forward, I'll pass it on to Ezekiel. He's going to go over how the pandemic has caused fear and anxiety.
Ezekiel. So we're going to talk about how the pandemic has caused fear and anxiety. for most adolescents and teenagers. The pandemic has negatively affected teenagers in many ways. Some of the ways teenagers rely heavily on social connections for emotional support. During these years, teenagers are discovering themselves and their bodies. Social distancing can cause can sever these ties and important connections that they're supposed to be making during these years. Data shows that 1 in 5 youths globally are experiencing clinical and elevated anxiety due to COVID. Data also shows that 1 in 4 youths have increased depression due to COVID-19 also. How physical appearance has caused fear and anxiety. Adolescents are in the stage where their body image and self-awareness is important for these teenagers due to peer pressure. Young women have an elevated appearance anxiety symptoms and lower appearance esteem more than boys. Earlier changes in young women can make it especially stressful. Earlier maturation for boys also can be teased by other peers and utmost risk for elevated appearance and anxiety symptoms. Things to look for them. Some of the causes that can cause anorexia nervosa, also known as abnormally low body weight with an intense fear of gaining weight and distorted self-image. Symptoms include using laxatives to attempt to lose weight, excessive exercising, and also fine hair on the body and face due to that's because of the body's own mechanism to try and keep itself warm. And bulimia is another disease, also known as bulimia obsessive, desire to lose weight, in which bouts of extreme overeating called binging, followed by excessive or self-induced vomiting. Signs and symptoms to look for are calluses on the knuckles due to attempts to induce vomiting, excessive amount of meals, more than normal, and excess hunger. Also, people sometimes eat alone due to embarrassment of the amount of what they have been eating. We need to take action. According to the CDC, extreme depression can lead to suicidal ideation in children. For youth between the ages of 10 and 24, suicide is among the lead causes of deaths. Resources available in our area for Contra Costa, we have the crisis hotline. The number is there, it's 1-800-833-2900, or you could text using the phones 20121. Staff and volunteers are available 24/7 for any type of questions or concerns. On-site school counselors are also available for any students. Appointments are always available, and walk-ins are for any type of crisis are also available. We have grief counseling at most schools. If not, you can contact your physician also. Appointments are always available, including walk-ins for any type of crisis. We do have the Youth Development Center here in Pittsburgh. It's at 1001 Stillman Avenue, Pittsburgh. And that's always nice places for our students to go who are feeling stressed and can communicate with other students or if they need help. We also have the local pastoral services, depending on your religion, which you can go talk to also. And these are our references that we have used throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ezekiel. So again, these are great resources to refer to in case you either yourself or your family personally or anyone that you know that needs help or you believe would need help. These are great resources to reach out to. In addition to that, other interventions or rather things that you can do to be able to address anxiety and fear if you're suspecting it or if you believe a loved one or someone you know is experiencing it. One way could be also just simply communicating. I know sometimes it might be difficult to communicate. So if it's not you yourself talking to this individual, maybe you can refer them to someone just like the grief counseling or to on-site school counselors. Sometimes some individuals find it a bit easier to communicate or to discuss some problems or concerns with people they are not very familiar with. Because some individuals believe that if they share it with someone who they know, they think there might be some judgment involved in there, though there may not be. Sometimes some individuals may believe that that might be the case. So if the individual does not or is not very comfortable talking to a loved one or someone they know, then it is good to refer them to on-site school counselors or any grief counseling, depending on what the source of their anxiety or fear is. So definitely communication is a great key to use, or a great idea, or treatment used to address these situations, and just basically putting the individual in touch with others, helping them know and understand that they are loved and welcome, and that they have a safe environment that they can be in, where they can turn to anyone for help. And if that may be a difficult case, of course, again, you can refer them to these specific places or to specific individuals that you may know. And also maybe you can personally reach out to the school counselors or to grief counseling or even the youth development center, sometimes being within a same community where they know that those individuals are also experiencing the same things may create that comfort for the individual, knowing that they're not alone and that there are other people out there who are struggling with the same thing. So if they can be surrounded by people who are also dealing with the same thing, for example, if they know some people, excuse me, who are having fears and anxiety related to COVID-19 because they had firsthand experience with it, they can it may be helpful to be surrounded with individuals who also experienced it too, who had seen or witnessed a loved one fall sick because of it, or had seen loved ones pass away because of it. So being surrounded by individuals who are sharing the same situation could help them cope better or help them manage their situation a bit better. And they can share with one another their ways of overcoming their stress and anxiety or fears and their challenges in life. And just being able to discuss it with those individuals and going through it together, it alone could be a great help to those adolescents. And do you have any other interventions that you guys wanted to share?
Oh, I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so that concludes our discussion or webinar about anxiety and stress or fear rather related to the adolescent population. We are open to taking questions and we'd be happy to go over a few of these topics with you guys. We're just going to open the chat here.
Thank you. And before we move to questions and answers, I just want parents to know that I did place a quick link for a short exit survey. If you can please complete that before you leave for today. And before we move to our Q&A session. Antes de pasar a las preguntas y respuestas, si puede tomar un momento para completar una breve encuesta de 2 preguntas. Muchas gracias. And it looks like we do have a few questions in the Q&A. And so if you have any questions, feel free to place them now in the Q&A. Thank you. There's a question in the Q&A that says she has a daughter who's experiencing anxiety and depression for about a year now, or a little over a year. She's receiving counseling, although the parent doesn't feel it's been helping her much. She's also taking medication. She's a little concerned and wants to know what else she can do to help support her daughter.
Hi. I think the best thing, I think you're doing a great job, Mom. It's a difficult subject to talk to. It's a difficult situation to have with your daughter or with any child going through something like this. But if you feel that she's been going already to, this counselor, don't know if it's really helping. Sometimes you have to switch counselors because maybe there's not a very good rapport that's going on between your daughter and the counselor. So sometimes it's a simple fix like that. And just remember, Mom, this is such a very sensitive subject for your daughter, and always just being there for your daughter and letting her know that you're there for her, for anything, no judgment, just there to listen is such a big comfort, can be a big comfort. Sometimes with medication also, this can take time. Medication sometimes takes months, before you actually really see any type of significant change. Sometimes medications need to be modified also. So that might also, that may be a factor into maybe why she is not feeling any better. But try doing some activities with her, even going out for a walk, getting some fresh air, doing something so basic like that can be really helpful to her. And just kind of reinforcing how much of a good job she's doing by going to her sessions and knowing that hopefully this will pass and that things are going to get better. This is a really critical age for them where they're very influenced so much. So just reinforcing that they're doing a good job and that it'll take time, but they're on the right path. I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that one.
That was perfect. I was gonna say the same exact thing. Yeah.
Next question.
There's a question. This is more reference to if a teacher refers a student at the school, perhaps the student's experiencing anxiety, do the parents get contacted? Yes. At all of our school sites, we have our COS teams, coordination of services team that meet regularly to see what students need support and what services we may bring aboard to support them, depending on the individual need of the student. Before services are brought aboard, parents are contacted. So yes, the answer to the question is yes. And then also in the Q&A, there's a question in regards to, are there any exercises that can help calm anxiety?
Yes, a few examples for that for exercises. Deep breathing definitely helps an individual who is experiencing anxiety in that moment. Sometimes in anxiety in a given situation, the individual might have what's called a panic attack. And so when they're having that panic attack, they might have that rapid breathing and they might be breathing to the point where they're gasping for the air, not losing air, but really breathing at a fast rate. And so if that were to happen, you can teach the individual to take really calm, deep breaths, like take a really deep breath in through the nose and then out through the mouth like that. And doing that several times in that given situation will help them to calm down. And then talking it out also, if they are able to, if they're not having a very severe panic attack, if they are able to talk it out with a loved one or anybody that they trust or anyone that they're comfortable with, that could also help them calm their emotions and help them to basically refocus their thoughts and be able to gather what it is they would like to express. And that can help them through their anxiety in that situation. Do you guys want to help any exercises?
So, I mean, just sometimes stepping away from the situation that's causing the anxiety also, just kind of take a step back, think about what's going on. Think about if it's really that important to get stressed over the situation too, and just kind of in reference to what's going on. Going outside, taking a walk, some healthy exercises, just get outside, like I said, talk to the parent, talk to, an adult about what's going on, just making sure safety first to make sure, you don't want to, anything to get out of hand or do something, that can change your life. So just think about the situation. Just get outside, get some exercise, use some healthy stressors and stuff, get that stress out, especially whatever is causing the anxiety. If it's homework, just step aside, take a step back, take a break sometimes. Think about what you're doing, but always, time management, making sure you're using that time wisely, not just, procrastinating and, making sure you do everything last minute sometimes helps.
I also wanted parents to know, I just placed in the chat, we do have an online resource for families available through our district website, both in English and Spanish. I placed both of the links in the chat so you have access to them. Otherwise, if you just go on our Pittsburgh Unified School District main page and scroll down to the bottom section under school information for this school year, and then just click on PUSD resource guide, there's a lot of resources there available, not just within our school district, but also within our community. And some of those mindfulness practices that you mentioned, the deep breathing, there's videos on there that you can access to practice with your child. There's a question, the Q&A, is this available for elementary schools? We did have this presentation last week for elementary schools, and the presentation PowerPoint is in your Parent Square account, and we'll be putting both of the recordings from last week and this week onto our Parent Square accounts within a week or two. And I don't see any additional questions. We can check the chat.
I think so.
Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. But again, within the school district, if you ever have any concern, your first line of contact would be your child's teacher. If they're in elementary school, if your child's in our junior high schools or high schools, you can also reach out to your child's counselors. And of course, our school administrators are always a resource as well. I will also put Dr. Cataldi's information in the chat. If you want more information or you feel you would like to gain services for your student, you can always do a referral as a parent. Students can also self-refer themselves as well if they feel that they're in need of services. So I'll put his information in the chat as well. And then if Nurse Torres has anything she'd like to add on to there.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to reiterate that we do have resources within the schools, and the best thing is to maintain open communication with your child and the schools, like their teachers or their counselors, or even the vice principal and principal. And lastly is our children, they often feed off of our own energy. So when we're feeling anxious or fearful, they will know that, and they might not know what it's called or how to cope with it. So a really important step is for you to model, to show positive coping behaviors. So you know, taking that moment to take a breath instead of isolating yourself or lashing out, or using other coping skills as drinking alcohol to calm your nerves. So if we could help ourselves, we'll be in turn helping our children. And I just want to send out appreciation to all the parents who have taken the time to join us today. And if you feel like it is helpful, please share it with your peers and other parents who may not have had the opportunity to attend today. They can view it later. Seeing this, something came up in the chat. Do you think that fights at school could be some of the problems? So I believe that the fights at school are often a result of anxiety in the children. That's how it's presenting themselves, because even us as adults, when we don't know what's going on internally, our instinct is to either fight or flight. So we either run away from the situation or fight it. And when you're in that mode of fight or flight, when just small stressors happen, like say, you think that somebody looked at you the wrong way, or they accidentally touched your backpack, in a certain way, then you're not used to coping or dealing with it in a positive way that's helpful for you. And so instead, they'll turn around and get into an argument, and which will escalate really quickly. Other questions? Um, okay, I think that is all the questions I see. Leticia, are there more questions that we need to review? If you're seeing something, or if your children are saying that these fights are posted on Instagram, please make the teachers and the administration, so talk to the counselors or the vice principals or the principals, aware of these instances or these pages, because unless we know that this is happening, there's nothing we can do about it. So please share those with the schools, principals or vice principals.
We do also have school resource officers on site at our secondary schools, so you can also share that with our school resource officers there. Again, in the text, in the chat, I did place on there a link so you can complete a short 2-question survey before you leave. We'd appreciate your feedback. And so I'd just like to take a moment to thank you for attending. I did place the PowerPoint presentations in the chat as well. We will be posting those in our communication platform in Parent Square, so look for those as well, especially if there's families that were not able to attend, they'll have access to those as well. And within 2 weeks, we'll have the recordings of today's session and last week's sessions also available to you through Parent Square. So we want to thank everybody for attending this morning. And thank you to Nurse Torres and her entire team. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.